welcome to the next podcast from Millinery.Info. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie. It's so wonderful to welcome you to this episode of Millinery.Info. In this series, we've been welcoming leading milliners from across the globe into your ears and studio. This episode is no exception, and I'm excited to have Tracey Tau from TOOALI Millinery on the podcast. Tracey's also the new owner of the Essential Hat. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you may be familiar with the Essential Hat, as I had some conversations with Catherine Ellen over her time as owner and also when she coordinated the MIMSI competition. The Essential Hat has entered its next era with Tracey, and we're excited to hear about how that's going for her and her plans for the future. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you so much to our Patreon podcast sponsors: Jennifer Hertz Millinery, the Millinery Retreat School of Millinery, Hat Blocks Australia, Be Unique Millinery, Hat Academy, Hatters Millinery Supplies, House of Adorn, Judith M. Millinery Supply House, Hats by Lico, Lifted Millinery, Louise McDonald Milliner, Millinery Australia, The Hat Magazine, and we're very excited to welcome aboard as our latest podcast sponsor, Barcelona Hat Days. Thank you so much to these Patreon supporters for sponsoring the podcast. You can find a link to each of these businesses in our show notes. You can find these show notes either in your podcast app or through our website. If you head across to the website, you'll also find some photos that go along with these podcasts. Thank you so much for listening today. If you've been enjoying this podcast series and have a moment, we'd love if you could show your support by becoming a Patreon. You could be a podcast sponsor and hear your name mentioned, or if you'd like to show your support more quietly, there's two other tiers available. There's a small thank you to Millinery.Info and Millinery.Info, you inspire me. So if you've got something from these podcasts and you'd like to say thank you in some way, that's a great way to do it. You could also share this podcast with a fellow milliner or someone you think that might enjoy hearing about these creative stories. Thank you so much, Tracey, for welcoming me into the Essential Hat. It's so exciting to be here and get to hear about your millinery journey, but also the next iteration of the Essential Hat.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me.
Oh, my pleasure. So I guess the backstory for those who might have been listening is the Essential Hat used to be owned by Sue Drer. Yes. And then was Catherine Ellen, and now it's come to you. But let's dive back to your millinery story first. How did you first become involved in millinery?
I'll go back a tiny bit before that and say it's the end of year 10. The nuns said, Tracey, we don't think you should come back next year. And to which I did a little happy dance and skipped out of the convent grounds and never looked back. I was very young still, and my mother said, you're too young to go to work, so you'll have to go and do some study. So my sister had gone to Stotts Business College, and she said you can either go to business college or you can go to a dressmaking, college or something, because I'd sewed all my life. I'd always cut it from the time I could hold a pair of scissors. I'd cut bits of. So Mum said, what do you want to do? And I thought, I don't want to do business college. So then it was the search for an appropriate dressmaking, pattern drafting, all of that sort of stuff. And there was two options for me. One was where I finished up going to school, which was the McCabe Academy of Dressmaking in the Manchester Unity building. And I chose that because it was a 1-year course. And I wanted to do the course, get a job, leave home, start living a life and away from Mum and Dad's rules. The other option that I had was Emily McPherson College, which was a 2-year course. And they taught millinery. And I said, who wants to know how to make hats? It's 1975, we've moved on. So I took the short route, went to the dressmaking college, started, pattern drafting and design and did all that, which has been a great skill to have under your belt all these years. Yes. And I sewed and sewed and sewed and sewed for, my formative years up until I probably became a mother, and too cumbersome to crawl around the floor and pin patterns on fabric on the lounge room carpet, like it's always been the process. Some years later, working in a job I hated, and I had a cousin who worked for the Victoria Racing Club. And I knew at cup time they took on a lot of temps. And I thought, and I also knew that if you were any good, they kind of just kept you on back in those days. So my cousin got me a 6-week contract at the VRC, working in their reservations area, which is all the ticketing for the grandstands and the dining areas and all of this. So I did that for 6 weeks. Well, as a consequence, I stayed at the VRC for 28 years. I'm pretty hard to get rid of. And
it really stuck out.
And of course, as part of working in the racing industry, you needed to wear a hat on race day.
Yes.
So I can't really afford to go to a proper milliner. So I might just have a little dabble. I was always a creative person.
You had the sewing experience.
Yeah. So I made my first little cocktail piece, to wear my first Derby day at Flemington, and I was so proud of myself. Until a girlfriend of mine said, "What's that bloody bowl of fruit doing on your head?" I was actually wearing a Proacton dress that had been my going away dress at my wedding, and it was a very shift sort of frock with a box pleated bottom, like dropped waist, but it had a big applique fruit panel on the front of it. And I just loved it. It was very Carmen Miranda.
Yes.
So I'd made this little white cocktail hat out of a disc of cardboard with white, not satin, but a white crepey material wrapped around it and gathered back in on the cardboard disc. And then this little arrangement of tiny fruit that I'd managed to come across from somewhere. And I was very proud of this hat.
Yeah.
She still jibes me about that hat, that girl. And you know who you are if you're listening to this. And so that was the start. And then as I said, I glued feathers on headbands and things and did all those cringeworthy pieces that, when we all start out, we make and are very proud of. And then at one point in time, my darling daughter, who was about 17, said, "Mum, I want to pay for you to go and do a millinery course for Mother's Day."
Aww.
So she gave me a voucher, a made-up voucher of, here's $200 to go towards a millinery course. And it wasn't the actual cash to do it. It was just but you organise it and I'll pay for it. Well, that never got cashed in for quite some time. And I can't quite remember where my first class might have been. I'm going to say at Louise's, because that's the very first time I ever blocked a hat on a hat block. Everything else had been, as I said, cardboard, hot glue and feathers. Yeah, and then I suppose I was hooked and... come forward, let's say 20 years, and here I am owning a hat shop, and who knew?
Here we are.
That's how I got to here. I mean, I did Kangan. I did 2 years at Kangan.
Yes.
Trained with the late Paris Kine, who in first year doing Cert 2, I could have stabbed in the eye with a pair of scissors at any given time, because he was a very prickly pear, Paris. But by second year, I don't know whether it was because we weren't the new kids on the block anymore or we'd earned our stripes or whatever, but he was a very different person, and it was very sad that it was a Monday night's class and we were sitting in class going, "Where's Paris? Where's Paris?" And, things started to twig that something wasn't right. And then, of course, the next day we found out that poor Paris had passed away over the weekend, very unexpectedly. Yes, it was sad. So, but I trained at Kangan with Paris, with Serena, Melissa Jackson, probably others that I can't remember now because my memory is so terrible. And then why we didn't do Cert 4 in millinery was because the course had got so ridiculously expensive.
Yes.
And a lot of it was repetition. And I think the Kangan course, in my mind, was designed for kids coming out of school who've never worked, needed to understand, the workroom scenario, running an event if you wanted to have a fashion parade, all those sort of things. Well, my background at the VRC was events, so I'd managed my household budget for a long time. I didn't need, financial things. So by Cert 4, it was kind of like, no, all I want to do is learn how to make hats and specific hats. So 3 or 4 of us branched out and we did private classes with people whose work we admired. So that was Richard Nylon, Rose Hudson, Serena. It was interesting, because one of the things that we'd started, I think, in Cert 3 and more of in Cert 4 was wire work.
Yes.
And I love wire work. And Rose had taught us one technique, and then we went to Richard's and I saw what he did with something and I said, "How'd you do that?" And he goes, "Oh, I just do that." And I went, now that's even better than that. Sorry, Rose. We followed where our interest was and what was a better use of our funds and time and passion, I think, for the equivalent of what was Cert 4.
Yes.
So then I probably on about half a dozen occasions attempted to join the Millinery Association. And every time I'd fill the paperwork out, it came to the part of Cert 4 or equivalent. And I thought, well, I haven't done Cert 4. What am I going to do here? And then, the papers got to the bottom of the pile. And then, 2 or 3 years later, I'll join the Millinery Association. So I'd start again. Fortunately, by the time I actually did manage to complete the process, the Millinery Association had changed the criteria to Cert 4 or equivalent. And by that stage, there was enough people that were on the committee of the association or that knew me anyway who could vouch for my skill set and whatever. Yes. So consequently, I became a member of the Millinery Association. Design award time came around. Yes. So I did my first design award piece and came in the top 10. And I thought, I've got this covered, I'm good at this.
Got the stripes, here we are.
I'm good at this. Which that was pretty exciting first time in.
Which year was that? What was your piece?
That would have been 23, I think, because that was the last one in Melbourne before the one in Sydney last year for 2024.
Ruffles?
Ruffles was the one that I came, and then we had Pearl last year, which I liked my piece and I was happy with it, but didn't get anywhere, but that's not the point. And I'm currently working on this year's celebration piece, which, needs to get moving. So here I am, 18 months, I suppose, into the association and currently sitting in the vice president's seat.
It's really just jumped on in there.
It was kind of like, okay, I'll do it, but I have got no idea of what I'm doing. But, I mean, all these sort of things you learn on the fly, and we're very fortunate to be under the tutelage or guidance of Georgia Skelton, who I've got to know extremely well in the last 4 or 5 months, and she's a great leader and very experienced and very down to earth and level headed. So I'm proud to stand beside her and the team that we've got on the committee at the moment.
It's a fantastic team.
So that's all going extremely well.
Fantastic. And your hat making, had you started when you finished the Kangan period and were doing those other classes? Did you start your own label, or were you just making for yourself in that time?
What I was doing then, very many years ago, I think it would have been the 80s, was doing applique on windsheeters and things. So I came up with a brand name then that was TOOALI, which is pronounced TOOALI and is an acronym for the only one around like it. So I've settled on that as a millinery brand, so I am TOOALI Millinery. So technically the TOOALI Millinery label had come into fruition prior to going to Kangan.
Yes.
And I used to do little stalls at South Melbourne Market and some craft markets and things like that, and sold a few bits and pieces and was very proud of myself. But it was never anything substantial. And even today, I don't necessarily have a client base that I work with, but I've been very fortunate through my connections in the racing industry to be part of the millinery offerings at Moonee Valley through an ex-colleague. And that's where in the last probably 6 years that I've had a table at the Cox Plate Ladies Lunch, and that's been my mainstay of selling pieces, and that's probably earned me a few regular clients that come back to that. But I've got to say, I'm not a fan of making to order. I love to pick up, it's a material or it's a trim or it's something that'll spark my imagination, and I go, what can I do with this? Because of my sewing background, I am a sucker for fabrics. Yes. Because of having discovered I do have ADHD in my later years, anything shiny grabs my attention very easily. And so that's where my inspiration comes from. And look, sometimes I look at other people's work and go, it's so classic, it's so elegant, and I think, I need to do that. But I get no joy out of that. I can do it, there's no question about that. And there's some, there's hats that I've made since I've been here at the Essential Hat that I've done laboriously, and there's others that I've done lovingly because I've been given full creative license on. So when someone comes in and says, I like that, but I don't like that piece on there, I want that shifted over there, I say, lady, go and do a millinery course. Or in my head I say, go and do a millinery course, and, then you can create it how you want it. I'm an artist, so I'll produce an artwork. You either like the artwork or you don't like the artwork. You don't go to a painter and say, oh, look, can you do me that same painting, but can you put that tree on the other side because I don't like the way that tree shadows. You don't do that. So, and I think that's a hard pill to swallow as a milliner when you've got someone who wants to take charge of the creative. Having said that, I've got another client that I do work with here who she and I just play together. Like, I'll give it she'll come in with an idea and a trim or something, and then we'll say, I'll say, I've got something upstairs that'll go with that. So how about we'll work with it. It's a real collaboration. It's not, put that there and do this and do that. So that is hard as an artist to work to that sort of a brief.
Yeah. And coming to the essential hat, how did this all come about?
Well. Catherine used to run the MIMSI competition, which was the Melbourne International Millinery competition.
Yes.
And I had entered that a couple of times. And what happened to the essential hat, as with many businesses, was COVID.
Yes.
When it was understood that there would be no patrons allowed at the Cup Carnivals for the first year, we knew it wasn't going to happen, and we didn't know then that it was going to happen for the second time as well. But once they took the patrons attending the Cup Carnival away, Catherine realised she wasn't going to have any clientele for that spring carnival, so therefore the rent was going to be hard to pay. So she decided to shut the retail shop down and work from her home for those clients who maybe needed things for other reasons, give up having to pay the rent for that period. You know, most people would understand that a milliner's primary income comes in around spring carnival time.
Particularly in Melbourne.
That Melbourne Cup. And I, more than most people, know the economic impact that the Melbourne Cup has on the state coffers, which is enormous. I don't know the stats off the top of my head these days, but they've done the sums and the numbers, and the amount of hotel rooms, meals, tourists that come in, how many shoes, handbags, earrings, dresses, all of those things that are bought that are attributed to people attending the Melbourne Cup is absolutely mind-blowing. That 4-day carnival, and I speak only from the VRC point of view, obviously the other racing clubs have their carnivals as well.
Yes.
But the amount of money that brings into the state revenue is amazing.
Yes.
So Catherine shut the shop down, worked from home for a while, and then coming into this, so we must have missed 21 and 22 carnivals. I'm not sure how that...
Definitely 2021.
Yeah. So it might have been... No, sorry, it was the spring of 22. Sorry, yes, it was the spring of 22. Catherine decided that she would be brave and put her toe back in the water in the retail bricks and mortar area, and found the premises that I'm currently occupying at 67 Glenferrie Road, Malvern, and reopened the Essential Hat for the spring of 22.
As a pop-up space, was it?
Oh, well, it was and it wasn't, I think. It was, she'd taken it on for that, a period to see how it went, but I don't think she got the chance to make that decision wholeheartedly, because about a month into the lease, a little pipe burst under the sink here that Lauren and I are sitting beside. The fittings underneath the sink had been treated with Bunnings hose fittings, apparently. And eventually, once the water was turned back on here and the pressure built up, and then one weekend the pipe burst, this floor was flooded, which then flew down, went down through the walls, through the floor to the shop below. We have a beautiful pressed metal ceiling downstairs, and the water was dripping apparently through all the pressed metal sheets, down through all the lights. It had run right to the front of the shop on this floor upstairs, and then was running down the shop window like the art gallery. I've seen the footage of it. It's pretty devastating. So Catherine had then had a flooded shop, and anyone who was a consignee in the Essential Hat got a very panicked message on the Monday morning saying, the shop's flooded, the hats are ruined, I don't know what I'm going to do, stand by. And I was one of those, and I thought, oh my, the poor thing. Anyway, long story short, she managed to dry the shop out, trade through the spring, more millinery came in from other milliners, and I think there was a time there where she had to vacate for the landlord to do some work, and things didn't go right there, and in the end Catherine just said, I've had enough. It's been 13 years working 6 days a week, owning the business, and said, I think I want to do other things with my life. So, and how it came to be me having the conversation at the time was I'd entered the MIMSI competition the piece that I'd entered that year had been selected by a colleague of Catherine's in France, who runs a lovely fashion parade and a beautiful salon in Paris. And my hat had been picked to go over to be one of the hats in this fashion parade. So it had come back from Paris and I had to go and collect it from Catherine's. And it was a beautiful sunny afternoon, probably about this time of the year. We're sitting on her back deck in the sun and I said, well, what are you going to do? And she said, I have no idea. So we had a little bit of a chat and I said, put some numbers down on a bit of paper for me and let me know, what your thoughts are. And which she did, and I looked at it and went, I can do that. So here we are, running a hat shop. Yeah.
What were you up to in your other working
life?
I
think, and I'll go back to mentioning the ADHD situation. I left the VRC in 2014. I then went to another contract for about 6 years that took me into 2020. And then I was made redundant there. And then I did some other, contracts, 3 months here, 3 months there. Yes. And then things fizzled out. And I thought, I'm of retirement age. And I thought, I think I'll just, sit back and enjoy life for a little while and take a breath. And I discovered very quickly that I couldn't function.
That didn't work.
It didn't work. I couldn't function at home. And I now know I have ADHD. It's not undiagnosed, but my daughter has it, and she's a nurse, and she said to me, Mum, guaranteed, I got it from you. And I look around now, I can't stay in my lane anymore. When you're working and you have a job, you get up in the morning, you have your shower, you get dressed, you go to your job, you do what you know you have to do over there, you get paid, you come home, you cook the dinner, you go to bed. When you don't have those boundaries, I was like on a 5-lane highway and owning every lane and just driving all over the place, sometimes backwards in opposite directions, and I couldn't function. I couldn't get anything done. I couldn't complete anything. And that's when I discovered that something's not right in my brain.
Just different.
Yes. Neurodiverse, I think they call it. Yes. But that was one of the primary reasons that I wanted to take on the essential hat, was because I thought I need to have something to do. I need to have a focus. I need to have a purpose.
Yeah.
So, and boy, have I got all of those now.
In bucket loads.
And to the point that it's very hard to run a millinery shop, make hats, do the administration, buy stock and all of that, juggle all of those balls on your own. So I managed to convince my darling husband to retire and come and work with me in the shop.
So just retire from that.
Oh, yeah,
and then come work here.
As he likes to say, he's retired from paid employment. Now he's got non-paid employment. It's called for love. And look, and a part of the thing was, we haven't been married very long, and I wanted to find a partner I could spend my life with, to engage, to live a life together with.
Yes.
And that's what I see we're able to do now, because he's very passionate about the business. He's very passionate about millinery. When I met him 5 years ago, coming up 6 years ago, he didn't own a hat. Now he's got more hats than I do. And he wears them very well,
He does wear them very well.
So, and he does love to dress up. So all of those things, he's great in the shop. His previous job, he was a customer service manager. He's wonderful on the floor. He's engages well with all the customers, and got a bit of charm. The ladies love the charm. The older ladies I should say. And he's fit in really well, and so he's taking over some of the admin side of it, which frees me up to be a more creative person.
Yes.
And so we're only a month into that new process, so I'm just starting to tidy up the workroom, sort out all the supplies so I know where everything is, because when I took over the business from Catherine, there was a monumental amount of raw materials and hat stock and things, and it took a lot to wrangle all of that. I'm pretty much on top of all of that on the actual shop floor, but the workroom needs a lot of attention, and Lauren can see it from here. You can't, folks, but all of these tubs here and more on the other side are all full of half-made pieces that I inherited from Catherine. So what we did last year, September, with a few other milliners, I opened it up to what I called the millinery mashup, and I got all these milliners in to say, go through all those tubs, find some pieces that talk to you, and see what you can make out of them, which they did. And they're on the floor as a consignment piece, and they'll get 50% out of it, when they're sold, and which means this stuff's not being wasted. A lot of this isn't my aesthetic, so I would not use it potentially, but bringing a collective of milliners together, different styles, different texture artists and things, it was really interesting to see what person A said, oh, I like that, that's interesting, what can I put with that? Oh, look at that over there. Oh, okay, I'm going to put those two together and make this fabulous piece. And what I have here that you can see, Lauren, I have equally as much at home that belongs to TOOALI Millinery. This all belongs to the Essential Hat.
Yes.
So, and I don't like to mix my toys. So this stuff here, as I said, I need 10 more lifetimes to be able to consume the amount of millinery things I've got here.
Yes.
So, if any of you ladies in millinery land are looking for bits and pieces, come and see us at the Essential Hat. We may have something that you like.
So when you took on the Essential Hat from Catherine, you took on like the materials, the stock, the name. How was that transfer, I guess, of IP and stuff?
The hardest part was, we don't have a website at the moment because the website that the Essential Hat ran with was very old, was written in code.
Yes.
And luckily for Catherine, her husband, darling husband Steve, is a programmer and he could manage it. So it was outside the realms of possibility when I took over. So it was always a plan that within, 6 to 12 months we would rebuild a website, which we are currently fathoming our way through now, and hope to have it, in the next couple of months, have something live. The website gives you the credibility that, if anyone from outside is coming to have a look at what the Essential Hat does, and you don't have a website, it kind of, why not? So that's an important tool, and it's on its way, folks, but it's not quite ready yet. But look, both Steve and Catherine were very, very supportive in getting everything signed over to me, and pretty much with a few hiccups with getting the emails sorted out and stuff, it wasn't all that bad. But the amount of product, it was 2 full furniture vans full of stock that came from Catherine's to here, and when it first arrived, I just looked at this mountain of tubs and thought,
oh golly,
I'm never going to get through this, but you do. And that's now, with Yuri being able to be here and be on the shop floor, I'm now have 5 days a week, which if I plan my day reasonably well, I can get through some of this stuff. But prior to that, I haven't had that luxury of being able to sort through it. And as Lauren's sitting here and I'm looking at her, she's got tubs of hats sitting behind her that are viable but need some man hours and some love. And hopefully now they're the sort of things that I'll be able to turn my hand to and get moving.
Yeah.
But, I love millinery. I think for me, it's the tradition. I think I love the tradition. And it breaks my heart when people come into the shop and say, oh, I love hats, but nobody wears them anymore. And I say to that person and any other person, lead by example. Yes. I said, because if you go out on the street with, if it's the middle of winter, you've got a coat on, you put a little beret on and a scarf around your neck and you look fabulous, someone else will see you. Someone else will say, my God, she looks fantastic. I want to look that good. And the next thing, you've got someone coming in to buy a beret to try and emulate the person that they saw and admired on the street. That's my biggest message, is lead by example. Yes, we know fashion's changed and hats aren't part of our daily routine, but if you love a hat, wear a hat. I was very delighted last year when the Millinery Association took on a World Hat Walk, because to me, I think that's one of the biggest assets that our industry has been gifted by the wonderful ladies in Barcelona and the other, how many is it, 57, 58 countries or something?
I think there were 58 participated this
year.
year.
I think it's just phenomenal. And even every time someone came into the shop and I'd talk about Hat Walk, and I'd say 58 cities around the world are doing the same thing on the same day. Okay. We've only done it for the second time this year, and I think that event will just grow and grow once it gets a little bit of momentum behind it. And you were there, Lauren. You saw, we didn't have a great attendance, but boy, we had a great time.
Yes.
And you walk in a group like that wearing hats, and everyone watches you. Everyone's going, what's going on? What's this all about?
Why do they look so fabulous?
Yeah, why do they look so fabulous? So it takes a bit of courage sometimes for people to wear a hat, because a lot of people are timid. A lot of people have quiet personalities. I don't understand that. It's not, it's not
yours.
my
It's
style.
not yours. That's okay.
Even ladies in the shop, I don't want anything I don't want to be noticed. And I go, why not? Why not? You're fabulous. Yes. Why not?
Yeah.
Try and make people feel good about themselves, because that's really important. I used to say to my colleagues, if I come in and I've got no makeup on and I look like garbage, it's because I feel like garbage today. If I come in today and I'm in colour and I've got earrings on and the makeup's on and my hair's done and and I'm looking pretty swish,
feeling it,
that's because I'm feeling it. And I really believe that how we dress plays a huge part in how we feel.
Yes. And
that's another thing that I try and pass on to customers. It's okay to feel good too. Because a lot of people, I don't know, I think a lot of people feel guilty if they dress big and feel good. And as I said, there is a certain amount of intimidation about that. So I'm encouraging people all the time to try and step over that little hurdle and look fabulous.
I'm going to quote you back to you, probably incorrectly. But before we kicked off the hat stroll in Melbourne, you spoke and welcomed everyone. And you said a line about something about whether we're wearing hats for fashion, for fun, for sun smart, and you listed all these wonderful reasons that people can be wearing hats, self-expression. And I loved how you framed that there are so many different ways and reasons
to wear a hat.
Hats.
Yeah. And look, I think one of the biggest things that I preach here is sun protection. Everyone coming in here is looking for sun protection because they've had melanomas removed or skin cancers removed, and it's a very, very common thing, and it's just more and more prevalent as each year goes by. And some of us are of that age where we did the damage to our skin when we were very young because we baby oiled and sat in the sun, probably with metal things under our chins to reflect the sun back up, that damage has been done. I think younger ones are a bit more sensible as far as that's concerned. Hopefully they are. But sun protection is one of the greatest reasons in Australia to wear a hat. And it's not just a recommendation, it's a necessity. Yeah. If you pick a hat up and you hold it up to the light and you can see the building across the road through that hat, put it down, because it's not going to give you the protection. You need the hat that's got the dense weave to really give you protection. But, I mean, that's me on my soapbox. That's a cold, hard fact. Yeah. So if you're wearing a nice little lacy number from, a sports girl that looks fantastic, but it's crocheted, it's not giving you the sun protection. It's giving you some protection, but it's not giving you the full protection that you need. Yeah. And the other side of that coin is I always say, I go to the races, not as much as I used to, but you still see people with, and I don't want to be offensive here, but cheaper pieces that have come from Target or, Lincraft or Sports, all of those little places. But I will still say I would rather see someone with something on their head at the races than nothing on their head. If you can't afford a milliner,
it's a luxury
item. A luxury, thank you, that's the word I'm looking for. It is a luxury item, and if you can't afford that but you want to do something and you have got a little piece from somewhere else that hasn't been very expensive, but you are still participating. Yeah. And I think sometimes what happens is, and I say to people when they come in here, they go, I don't want anything too loud or too fancy. And I say, that's fine. We have some lovely entry-level pieces here for you. Yeah. And I said, but what will happen? I said, you'll go to the races in one of these more sedate, smaller pieces, and you're going to see people who look absolutely fabulous. And you're going to go, I want to look like she does. So you'll come back next year and we'll take you up a couple of levels. And I said, we'll have you in level 7 in no time,
But it's a confidence building thing.
Yeah, it is. And you do have
to familiar with it. And it's really, I think, out of context. They come in here, they're in a shop environment, they're on a high street, they're not at the races. It's out of context.
It's like going to a fancy dress costume place and you go, it's fabulous, but I have nowhere to wear it.
Yeah.
Well, we can take it back a peg or two, and we can start you down at a more sedate level, and then as you get more confident and as you get more encouraged, you'll level up on the way through. So I'm an advocate for that all the time.
Absolutely. And I mean, some of us know the history of the Essential Hats run previously, but how are you managing the stock? You're buying in wholesale, you've got pieces on consignment. What's the balance on the shop floor?
Outside of spring carnival time, you're not selling couture millinery every day of the week. I've done a couple of pieces for a lady going to Ascot. I've done but sold a top hat to an ex-racing colleague who's off to Ascot.
Yes.
But that dribbles throughout the year. You've still got to run a business the other 9 months of the year. Mm-hmm. So there's an occasion to wear a hat every day. So you've got to have everyday hats to sell as well. It's berets, it's men's felts, it's Panamas, it's flat caps, and, Baker boys for ladies and things. And I make some Baker boys out of old ties. Ties are fabulous because they're already on the bias. Yes. So a collection of old ties made into a Baker boy, it looks fantastic. But sometimes you've got to get a lot of ties to get the right combination so that it actually looks good. But that's a great piece for someone who's, maybe grandpa's died or something like that. Yeah. It's a lovely keepsake to have a cap made out of a grandpa's or dad's old ties, which I just did for a lady, and then all the offcuts of the ties she took away because she said, my granddaughter loves working with scraps, and she can make all sorts of things. And I said, well, why don't you get it all the tail ends of the narrow ends of the ties? I said, get it to make you a vest out of those that will match the cap that we've just made. She said, what a grand idea. So, there's all sorts of ways. And I love upcycling because of my love for fabric. I am a sucker for an op shop. And in fact, prior to taking on the Essential Hat, I had a little secondhand clothing stall at Waverley Antiques, if you know that. And so when I came into the Essential Hat, I bought that clothing with me, and it is here available. But we use it to dress the mannequins because another thing, I think sometimes people can't paint the picture in their head of what a hat is going to look like with an outfit. And we always say to ladies, bring your outfits in. We've got a change room. Put your outfit on. Come out into the shop. Go through with and try on the pieces, because someone putting a hat on their head when they've just come from the gym across the road and they're sweaty with no makeup and got their activewear on, that hat's not going to look fabulous or not as fabulous as it could look once they're dressed, hair's done, makeup's done, and you'll get the full picture. So I think it helps having the mannequins in the shop to be able to put an outfit on, put the shoes on, put the hat on, and paint the picture for them.
Yes.
So we use those clothes to dress our mannequins, but a lot of them are made out of absolutely fabulous fabrics that in time, if they don't sell as a piece of clothing, they will become lovely pillboxes and things and stuff. So there's an element of sustainability there as well. So as I said before, I probably need another 2 or 3 lifetimes to actually fulfill all the ideas that I have in my head. And we know that's not going to happen, but I can live in hope. But that's where with the ADHD, there's just things boiling away in your head all the time. And I think it's part of any creative's brain function is to be just, in your head you're always dreaming, you're always visioning things. And sometimes it makes cooking dinner difficult because whilst the chops are burning on the stove, you're in the other room going, that feather would look really great on that headpiece there. I might just, hang on, there's another one over there. Look, what's that smell?
What's going on?
So,
who's not looking after the jar?
My husband says I have the proverbial goldfish brain. Oh look. So he doesn't allow me in the kitchen all that often. But that's the life that I have carved. That is the serendipitous journey I have found myself on. And I said to you before, Lauren, I think a lot of what's happened in my life, and it has found me. It's not necessarily I make a decision and say I'm going to go out and buy a hat shop. Where am I going to start looking? No. It's kind of like serendipitously you're having a conversation and then all of a sudden, oh, look, that might work. And I feel blessed that a lot of those things have found me over the time. And who knows what's ahead. Yeah. Watch this space. Okay. But I think I've had a really lucky life, and the adversity that I have come across has taught me great things about living life and about when an opportunity presents itself, you're very inclined to go, oh, I can't do that, or I shouldn't do that, or I can't afford that, or I can't do that. I kind of go, well, why not? How can we make it work? How can, wouldn't it be fun if we could just, so I think I'm probably fairly positive or naive, whatever you want to call it. And when it comes to the next stage of the essential hat, who knows what that might be. And now that we don't have Kangan to teach the future generations millinery, I feel a very strong responsibility to start working in that area. Maybe it's not me teaching. I don't know that I feel qualified enough, but I know there's other wonderful milliners out there who I would love to engage to come and be a tutor at the Essential Hat. And if anyone's listening and's got any grander, would like to, please reach out. I really want to provide an opportunity for people to learn, because we've lost Kangan. And if you're just starting out now, and to the best of my knowledge, the only place that you can do millinery tuition is part of the fashion courses. And it's only, like me back at Emily McPherson in the 70s, it's only a touch point sort of component. It's not a full-on course. And I don't know that the Essential Hat can do that either, but I still would like to be able to pass those skills on in some way. It's a really important, going back to tradition, it is a really important tradition to maintain. And like all things, I believe millinery will come back into vogue in a big way.
This gala is a great example
of
that.
Look at that.
That red carpet. Whew.
And you sort of think, that is the extreme end of it.
Yes, of course.
And, there's a big gap between where we are now and the Met Gala. But I think in time that evolution will happen, and we will go back to wearing hats more often, and I hope to be a part of that. Part of that, the history, the tapestry that is millinery, and vintage blocks, and the creativity and style. I mean, I love the 40s, 30s, 40s, and early 50s for style, and you can't beat it. The early Dior and all of that. We're not built like that anymore. Although I must admit, I look at young girls on the street these days, and I think there is a return to that very slender physique in young women, but not like they were in the 50s with tiny waists and, large busts, let's say. That shape has gone, but that's all part of evolution too. Yeah. The way our diets changed, our food is not what it was 40, 50 years ago. And it's changed the way the human body develops. I'm no professional in this area, but this is my opinion. We don't have the bodies of the women in the 50s anymore. Perhaps nor do we want it either, because they were very uncomfortable, I think, with corsets and all of that. But I still believe that millinery will evolve in the future. It may not be in my lifetime, but I hope I could get to play a part in bringing that resurgence around. And I know every milliner that I know feels the same way. Yeah. We love what we do. It is an absolute passion. Passion/obsession. I don't know where the definition, where the line is in that, but it is. If we go out anywhere to an op shop or a collectibles place or anything like that, I'm looking for hats. I'm looking for something that looks like a hat stand. I'm looking for fabric that might work into a hat. It's in there. It's in the blood, and it's I don't know where it came from, apart from my time in the racing industry, but maybe I have lived a life previously in an earlier decade, and I'm channeling that in my millinery now, and I always say my millinery will have a vintage vibe about it. It won't be modern. It won't be futuristic. It will always have a tendency to throw back towards something more classic. And try as hard as I might sometimes to steer away from that, I'll look at millinery, my pieces, and I'll just go, I just can't. I can't put my label on that, because I don't. It's like having your shoes on the wrong feet. So eventually that piece will evolve and go back to where I feel comfortable with it. Yeah. And I can look at a piece and go, nah, don't like it. or oh, I love it. You know, there's, and I presume every other milliner's the same. You have a benchmark in your head that you work up to, and perhaps beyond, but anything below that, you're not satisfied with it.
There's a piece here to my right that is, when I look at it, I go, that is a iconic essential hat style. And I know there are a few pieces that have come, or designs that have come from Sue through to Catherine. Where does that aesthetic fall for you? Is that something you're looking to continue some of those styles, or
that's a very interesting question, because I can tell you now, those two pieces Catherine made for me, because I don't know how to do this little. I do now, but I didn't at the time. Yes. And they are very classic essential hat pieces. And there's a couple of things. Catherine was a huge lover of ginseng, and it's not my go-to. It definitely, Catherine did wonders with it. And that's where the change for the essential hat, I think, it's got the Tracey vibe. It's had the Catherine vibe. Yes. It had the Sue vibe to start with. And, you know, in time to come, I hope I can pass the baton on to someone else who will then bring their own personality to the face of the essential hat. But I hope I've brought the Tracey to the essential hat. You've seen the shop floor, Lauren, and it is very much my personality, I think. And freneticness of it down there is on purpose, because that's my brain. Sometimes my husband says, it's so cluttered down here, and other people come in and go, I love it, because you've got to look for everything. It's like a little treasure trove, and everywhere you look there's look at that. And that's what I wanted to create, and I feel that's what I have created, but the shop will always be a work in progress. I was mentioning to Lauren earlier that there's a couple of comments we've heard from passers-by that have twigged in our head that what we think we're doing, we're not hitting a certain mark. So as recent as last week, someone made a comment going past the shop, and Yuri said, right, we need to fix that, so this is how we will address it. And that was about not having, we don't have couture stuff in the window all the time outside of Spring Carnival, and you have to be very careful with couture millinery in a shop front window, because we get full sun in the morning and things fade. And you don't want that, but also I've got consignment millinery from other milliners, and it is my duty to be respectful and careful with their product as well. So I tend not to have, outside of Carnival, and I'm still at Carnival time, very careful about what I do put in the window. And if it's out there, it's only there for a couple of days and we change it over, because the sun is phenomenal through the glass on a product. We don't have that couture stuff in the window all the time. And someone made the comment the other day, they used to make all these beautiful hats, but now they just have all this sort of everyday stuff. The reason for that is you're not selling couture millinery every day of the week. The everyday stuff is there because it is outside of Spring Carnival time. And we have all sort of, it's a bit of winter, a bit of still sort of finer weather, casual pieces in the window at the moment. But we've tried to make the window tell a story. So we always do try to do a lovely Easter window, Christmas window, Mother's Day, and we've got lots of mannequins that we've got different faces and things, and we had a big Art Deco front window a little while back with two fabulous Art Deco mannequins that we had. And a woman in her negligee with all the hat boxes. So one of these mannequins is a bellboy and the other one is a waiter. So bellboy brought in all the, like a typical, movies from the 50s, all the hat boxes under his arm, and the waiter's bringing in the champagne and stuff, and she's just got home from doing her fabulous days shopping in New York somewhere. That's what we wanted it to look like anyway. And
we're on the journey.
And that's what we wanted, to have something that was of interest for the passers-by. And quite a few people come in and say, we love your shop windows. In fact, a couple of months ago, we came in one Monday morning and there was a lovely card under the front door from a passer-by just saying, thank you for so much for the effort that you put into your shop window.
Lovely.
Because it makes me smile when I come past. And I thought, bingo, that was exactly what my aim was.
Yeah.
I wanted people to come, because we are the far further end of Glenferrie Road, between Wattle Tree Road and Dandenong Road.
Yes.
And what I like to call the Paris end of Glenferrie Road.
Yes.
And so people don't come down this way on purpose a lot. So I wanted to give people a reason to walk past the shop, because the window, I wanted to make it like a my Christmas windows effect for the people of Malvern, and hopefully we are achieving that. But all those sort of things help from a retail perspective, building relationships with customers. As I said, now that my husband's working in the shop, he's very charismatic. He'll hate me for saying that. And he's not shy. So, he has great banter with the customers. And I think people appreciate that. You build that relationship with people, and that's really important. But even if someone is a one-off, comes in, if they have a good experience in the shop, they might have a bit of a laugh. Because there's nothing worse than going into a shop where someone says, "Good morning," and then you're sort of thinking, okay, so where does that conversation go from here?
What are we doing now?
Nothing I like more than leaving a shop light-hearted, having had a laugh, going, "Thank you very much for, and having a really good experience." And that's really important to me. And I suppose a lot of that's my skill set from the VRC. When you worked in events, you ran events, you hosted rooms and marquees and things, and that was your job. It was to meet and greet people, make them feel good, chat with them during the day. So a lot of that rubs off in what you do on the shop floor.
Yeah.
So it's important for us for the customers to enjoy themselves when they come in. And people will say, "Oh, am I able to try things on?" We go, "Absolutely," because that's the fun of it. You get to play dress ups when you're in here. Yeah. So it's been a great journey so far. No regrets whatsoever. Sometimes during Cup, like last year was our first Cup season solo, just Yuri and I in the shop. And when you're doing 7 days a week and you sort of start to scratch each other's eyes out by the end of the day, it's challenging then. But when you sit back at the end of it all and look and reflect back, you go, "Yeah, I'm glad we did it. We did a great job."
Yeah.
And hopefully we've made people happy.
Absolutely. So you're heading into what will be your second year, is this right? What's the rest of the year looking like for you? Is there a particular project you're looking forward to?
I want to actually get more millinery made. I didn't get a chance last year. A lot of my product on the floor has been created in seasons past. I would have done a few, there was a few custom orders and things, but I want to get more of my product on the floor. I treat myself as a consignee to the Essential Hat. Whereas in the past, the Essential Hat has made hats under its own label. At this point in time, anything that I touch, if I create something for an order for a customer, then it is under my label. It's been made by my hands to my design ethos. So it has a TOOALI Millinery label on it. Yeah. So at this point in time, the Essential Hat isn't making product itself.
Yes.
Apart from the things that we are making, like I talked about before, the mashup sessions, they are going out labelled the Essential Hat. Yeah. Because the product came from the Essential Hat. The milliners that have worked on it, they've donated their time, but they will get paid when that hat gets sold. So they're the only things that are coming out of the workroom under the Essential Hat label at this stage. Yeah. Other than that, I have about 4 milliners whose work is on the floor at the moment. Yeah. And they're milliners that I've worked closely with in the last couple of years, so they are my sort of stock standard consignees. And then at cup time, the doors of the Essential Hat will always be open to anyone who wants to come in as a consignee, and provided their product is of a sound quality, of course. Yeah. And because one person, as in me, you can't run a shop, you can't make enough product to stock a shop and run the shop and do the admin, as I have been doing up until Yuri coming on board. Yeah, you can't do it all yourself.
And the range of product as well. As you mentioned about the sun hat to the casual beret to the spring carnival, and the variety of aesthetic.
Most of the casual product is commercially purchased because you just can't. You can't keep it up. But some of the casual stuff then I do make when I have the time, and hopefully, I'll have more time going forward. Yeah. But look, I'm excited for the next 12 months now that Yuri's here, and I have, let's say I have my creative license back to be able to actually get to the business of making hats, because that's what we're here for.
It is what we're here for. I wish you all the very best for the next period of the Essential Hat, and thank you so much for your time and sharing your journey with us.
Lauren, thank you so much for asking me. I felt very honoured, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Tracey for her time, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Millinery.Info. It was so exciting to hear Tracey's story, and we wish her all the best as she continues to build and find her way in the essential hat. Thank you to our Patreon podcast sponsors for making this episode possible. Hat Academy, Millinery Australia, Hatters Millinery Supplies, House of Adorn, Judith M. Millinery Supply House, Hats by Lico, Be Unique Millinery, Lifted Millinery, Louise McDonald Milliner, The Hat Magazine, Hatblocks Australia, the Millinery Retreat School of Millinery, Jennifer Hertz Millinery, and welcoming Barcelona Hat Days as our latest podcast sponsor. Check out these businesses in the show notes of your podcast app or through our website. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie, and I look forward to bringing you another episode of Millinery.Info very soon.